Good morning, Cedar Valley, and happy Friday. This is our third, I think, edition of First Chapter Friday. Today, I'm going to read to you guys from one of our Lone Star books this year that I have had my eye on since it first came to our library last spring, just because the cover looks really fun and interesting to me, but I haven't yet, or I had not read it until I finally picked it up this week. And honestly, it has really been good. I haven't finished this book yet. I'm only about halfway in, but I'm really, really enjoying it. And so I wanted to share it with you guys today. The book that I'll be reading from is called The Stormkeeper's Island by Catherine Doyle. You guys might have seen this book cover. I've had it featured on several of our virtual book displays that we've done this year, but it hasn't been checked out that much. And so that is why I kind of wanted to promote it with you guys today because, like I said, I started reading it this week and I have really enjoyed it so far. So I think that a lot of you guys might as well. It kind of has like a Rick Riordan adventure with some sort of magic mythology kind of stuff tied in. It has that feel to it. It's set in Ireland, which I think is really fun. I'm kind of a sucker for stories that are set like in the UK. So it has kind of like a drizzly, rainy, kind of stormy kind of vibe to it, which I really love, especially this time of year when it's kind of drizzly and stormy in fall. So The Stormkeeper's Island by Catherine Doyle. So I'm actually going to read for you guys the prologue. There's a very short little prologue, and then and then I'll also read the first chapter. All right, The Stormkeeper's Island by Catherine Doyle. A very Irish last name. She must be Irish. Here's the prologue. In a field full of wildflowers, a boy and a girl stood side by side beneath an ancient oak tree. The sky was angry, the thunder growling like a beast. "Are you ready?" asked the boy nervously. The girl raised her chin, her wheat blonde hair sweeping down her back in a curtain. "I've always been ready." They pressed their palms against the gnarled trunk. The tree began to quiver, its branches stretching as it shook itself awake. There was a brief silence, and then a crack exploded above them. A whip of lightning leaped from the clouds and split the center of the tree in two. Flames erupted along the bark, climbing across the branches and devouring the leaves until everything was a bright, brilliant gold. "Betty," said the boy uncertainly, "should we—" "Shh," hissed the girl. "It's about to say something." The tree began to whisper. It was much louder than the boy expected, the crackle and hiss of surrounding flames slowly turning into words. "Speak, or be spoken to." The girl asked her question. As the tree considered it, she grew restless, tapping her fingers against the charred bark. The air grew heavier, a veil of mist curling the strands around her face. The tree did not speak to the girl again. Instead, it turned its attention to the boy and climbed inside his head. He fell to the ground, twisting and writhing, a vision unfurled in the blackness of his mind. He was standing on the edge of a headland, with the clouds gathering in his outstretched hands and the wind wreathing his body. He felt the sea rushing through his veins, leaving salt crystals in the lining of his heart. He knew that he was changed forever. Betty had been wrong. The island had chosen him. He tried to blink himself awake, but the tree tightened its grip on his mind. Another vision pushed its way through, something they had not asked to see. "Watch," hissed the tree. "Pay attention." A boy appeared before him. He was a little younger, but he was wearing the same nose and the same eyes. In one hand, he held an emerald as green as the island grass. In the other, a crooked staff that pointed out to sea. They stood apart from each other, looking but not really seeing, as ravens filled the sky in plumes of feathers. The earth cracked beneath their feet, and a shadow crept across the island and buried them in darkness. The boy woke up. Back in the field of wildflowers, it was pouring with rain. "Betty," he said, a droplet landing squarely in his mouth. "You won't believe what I've just seen." The girl was standing over him, her narrowed eyes like burning coals. She kicked him in the ribs. "Don't you mean what you just stole?" "Stop!" He twisted away from her as she kicked him again. I need to tell you something. Can you stop, please?" "Ow! Listen to me. I saw ravens. Betty, I think—" But the girl wasn't listening. She was stalking away from him in anger. Through wildflowers and sodden grass, her chin tipped to the weeping sky. The boy wanted to call her back, to tell her that this was much bigger than her, that it was bigger than both of them. But she had disappeared into thin air, leaving only the faintest ripple behind. The boy tried to swallow his fear. Somewhere deep inside the earth, the darkness was rising again, a darkness more terrible than anything the world had ever seen. It was too late to stop it now. And that is the prologue. Okay, sorry. Chapter 1, The Sleeping Island. Finn Boyle sat hunched on a plastic chair with his arms tucked into his sides and his chin tucked into his chest and tried not to be sick all over his shoes. The ferry groaned. Finn couldn't help noticing the rust around its edges, the flaking blue paint, how the horn sounded like a dying cow. He tried not to imagine how much seawater he would have to swallow to drown from the inside out. Tara wasn't watching him just then, but Finn knew that sisters could smell fear. If he hurled his lunch up, he would never hear the end of it. To make matters even more grim, Finn was wedged between two nattering old ladies, and his phone was useless in his pocket. No coverage, not even one bar. Sometimes the old ladies would stop and chew on a secret like it was too big to swallow. Sometimes Finn could feel their gazes prickling on the side of his face, like they were waiting for him to join in their conversation. Mostly, the waves roared and drowned out all of it. That was the worst of all, the ocean right underneath him. In his most gruesome nightmares, it would suck him up and gulp him down, and he would wake suddenly, dripping in sweat. The sea air burned in his lungs and stung his cheeks as he watched the mainland fade away, first to a green smudge on a gray horizon, and then to nothing at all. Already Finn missed the Dublin smog, the clang of roadwork and the half-finished tram tracks cutting up the city and flinging tourists from footpaths. He never thought about whether he really liked it or not, the noisiness of a city constantly in motion, only that it was familiar to him, and to Finn, familiarity meant home. This was anything but familiar. Tara stood at the bow of the ship, her feet planted on the railings like she was about to launch herself into the ocean. Her dark hair whipped through the air, loose and tangled like ropes. She turned, searching the cluster of passengers looking for him. "Come here, Finny! Look at the waves, they're huge!" Finn just shook his head. The ferry bobbed and his stomach went up with it, up and down, until the contents of his lunch started to climb up his throat. "Don't be such a baby," Tara taunted. Finn and his sister were close in age. Finn could even remember a time when they almost felt like friends. He supposed they'd had something in common, until the day she turned 13 and he stayed 11. And suddenly she was much too wise and too clever to hang around and play video games with him anymore. "I'm mature now, Finny. My interests have changed." Finn didn't know how Tara measured maturity, but he was the one cooking dinner for the three of them most nights, while Tara pawed Nutella out of the jar like Winnie the Pooh and shrieked the walls down any time she saw a spider. Tara smirked over her shoulder at him and then stepped even higher on the boat railings. peering over the waves until it looked like she was about to dive in, just to show him that she could. Finn thought it might be nice if she tipped right over and drowned a little. Not enough to die, just enough so that a fish could come along and eat the part of her brain that caused her personality to be so awful. He went back to staring at the blurry horizon, a fixed point to help with his motion sickness. His mother said that it would help with the motion of the boat. That was the last thing that she told him before their goodbye back in Dublin, when her eyes were clear and her smile was sad. Then all of a sudden, they were in their neighbor's car, Finn's nose pressed up against the window as they trundled across the country and left her behind. Finn waited for the island to appear, the one that she used to tell them about when he was younger, her eyes glassy with some faraway look. Sometimes the island was a beautiful place. Sometimes it was a sad, unforgiving place that held nothing but the memory of his father, long ago lost to the sea. All Finn ever knew for sure was that Aaronmore Island haunted his mother, and he could never figure out whether that was a mostly good thing or a mostly bad thing. Only that places can be just as important as people, that they can have the same power over you if you let them. Tara left her perch at the front of the ferry, skipped across the deck, and bent down until they were almost nose to nose. "Do you have to look so depressed about this?" she said. Finn didn't like the way his sister threw the word around like that, depressed, like it was a color that he was wearing, like it was something you could be and then not be by choice. Besides, it was easy for her to be excited about this. She had visited the island last summer and had somehow managed to make friends. "I just don't want to go," he grumbled. "I'm not going to pretend that I do." "You never want to go anywhere," Tara pointed out. "All you do is sit inside and play video games that you're bad at anyway. You're so boring." Finn wanted to say he wished he could stay behind with their mother, that he could sit beside her even when it felt like she couldn't see him. He wanted to say he wasn't bad at video games, that in fact he was excellent. Instead, he just said, "Shut up." Tara slid a Mars bar from her pocket, the result of a gas station shopping spree on the way to the ferry. Old Mrs. Waters, snapping open her floral purse full of coins, smiling at them with her toothy grin, said, "Get whatever you want, my loves." She took a bite of the candy bar, her words soupy from half-chewed caramel. "It's an adventure, Finny." She glanced from side to side, then dropped her voice. "This place is magical. Just wait and see." You only think it's magical because you met a boy last year," said Finn with a deep, biting disgust. Tara shook her head. "No, actually, I think it's magical because there are secrets on the island." Finn tried to waft the smell of chocolate away from his nose. "What kind of secrets?" "Can't tell you," she said, eyes gleaming with triumph. Finn sighed. "I can't believe I'm going to be stuck with you all summer." "Well, I wouldn't worry because I obviously won't be spending any time with you." She wrinkled her nose, her freckles hunching together. "You can hang out with Granddad." "I already like him better than you," Finn said quietly. "You don't even know him yet." Finn opened his fist to reveal his crumpled up ferry ticket. "I like this piece of paper better than I like you." Tara brandished her Mars bar at his nose. "You're so immature." "I'm not." Finn waited for her to look the other way and then threw the piece of paper at her. He watched it tingle in the ends of her hair and felt a little better then. Across the bay, a seagull dipped and swirled, its wings skimming the waves. It released a savage cry, and as if called to attention, the island rose up to meet them. Pockets of dark green grass bubbled out of the sea, climbing into hills that rolled over each other. Gravel roads weaved themselves between old buildings that hunched side by side along the pier, where the sand was dull and brassy. The place looked oddly deserted. It was as if the entire island was fast asleep. Aranmore. It was exactly how Finn imagined it, a forgotten smudge on the edge of the world, the perfect place for his soul to come to die. Tara flounced back to her perch, and Finn felt himself deflate like a giant balloon. He watched the faraway blurs on the island turn into people, shops, houses, and cars, and too many fishing boats to count. He tried to picture his mother here, in this strange place, wandering along the pier, ducking into the corner shop for bread or milk, or even standing on the shore looking out at the ocean with her arms pulled around her. He couldn't imagine it, no matter how hard he tried. When the ferry had finally groaned its way into port, Tara bounded onto the island without so much as a backward glance at him. Finn hovered on the edge of the pier, his spine stiff as a rod. Something felt wrong. The ground was vibrating underneath him, the slightest tremor rattling against his soles, as if his footsteps were far heavier than they really were. The breeze rolled backwards and twisted around him, pushing his hair into his eyes and his breath back into his lungs, until he had the most absurd sensation that the island was opening its arms and enveloping him. Finn searched the jagged lines of the headland. In the distance, at the edge of the bay, where briars and ferns tussled in a low, sloping cliff, a cottage poked out of the wilderness. The smoke from its chimney curled into the evening air like a finger. The wind pushed Finn across the pier. The smoke kept rising and twisting, gray, against the sun-blushed sky. It was beckoning him. Finn could almost hear the whispering in his ears, a voice he had never heard before, a voice thrumming deep in his blood and in his bones, a voice he was trying very hard to ignore. "Come here," it was saying. "Come home." And that is the prologue and chapter 1 of The Stormkeeper's Island. We have, I think, 3 copies of this book available right now in the library. So if you're interested in reading more, go on the catalog and search this book, The Stormkeeper's Island, and put it on hold. And it will be yours to take home before the Thanksgiving break, which would be fantastic. A little reading. All right. Happy Friday, Jaguars, and I will see you next week. Bye.